Okay, so Clint Brooks. Um, so in terms of art and authors, why is Clint Brooks in the art and authors section of this class? He seems not interested in authors. I put him in this section because his argument is that, and this is a big, hard thing for students to wrap their minds around, he doesn't think the authors matter. It's not that he doesn't think the author, he knows authors matter. Without authors, you don't have any art. But Clint Brooks says when you're talking about art, what you should be doing is not talking about authors. Just like you shouldn't be talking about history or philosophy. You should be talking about the actual specifics of the art. So let's take a look at what he has to say. By the way, I'm going to have a massive, complicated Hamlet-related example to kind of show you how this works. But let's take a look at some more Clint Brooks. So the crucial thing to know in this section is that intuition, the inseparability of intuition and expression, meaning the actual way that the specifics of how the art works, the looks, the words, the images, the music, the notes, is deeply connected to the idea. You cannot throw away the words to get to the idea. And he just repeats that in different words. The form and content, or content and medium, are inseparable. Okay. So I don't really want to spend too much time with this quote. So much for the process of composition. Okay. As for the critical process, so this is what you do when you're talking about art. To pass from the intuitable to the non-intuitable is to negate the function and meaning of the symbol. Metaphor is another way to look at that, right? To say to just throw away all the metaphors to talk about, well, it's a so example is let's say he's brave as a lion. It's a stupid example. I should get a better one. If he's brave as a lion, and you go, oh, that just means he's brave. It raises the issue of why lions, because there's all kinds of other ways you can describe somebody as brave. Why did you pick the lion? The specifics of the metaphor have to matter. That's a terrible fucking example. I'm going to try to come up with something better later. Let's go back into the text here. Okay. For it is precisely because the more universal and ideal relationships cannot be adequately expressed by means of the more intuitable, right? You need the symbol. It's part of it. You can't just throw away the metaphor and figure out what it's a metaphor for. The choice of metaphor matters. It's an important thing. Okay, let's take a look. For it is precisely because the more universal and ideal relations cannot be adequately, the most obvious examples of such an error, and for that reason, those which are really the least dangerous, are those theories which frankly treat the poem as propaganda. Right? So a lot of times in propaganda, the art is supposed to like educate the population to believe something specific. Like propaganda means like you do a whole movie, and the point of the movie is we should attack Germany and go to war. That's propaganda. And that's a classic example where they pretty much come right out and say the art doesn't matter. What matters is the message. Here's the message. Go to war. And he says it's not a big deal because you can it's pretty easy to tell with propaganda. When someone's like trying to brainwash you with a movie, it's often very easy to tell that that's happening. He's concerned about the more sneaky ways of doing that, where people get brainwashed into ideas. But again, because propaganda is a specific thing where the ideas really are more important than the art, because the whole point of the art existing is to convince people to go to war or whatever. So let's look at something else. He says the most subtle and the most stubbornly rooted in the ambiguities of language are those with beginning with the paraphrasable elements of the poem, refer the other elements of the poem to some role subordinate to the paraphrasable elements. I realize that's a frustrating way to put that. But paraphrasable, what's a paraphrase? That's when you put it in other words, right? When you say what Shakespeare was trying to say was, you're paraphrasing. You remember paraphrase from 101? It's when you take a quote and then you put it in your own words. But he's concerned that what people do when they write essays is they translate things into other words. And they don't give a shit about the actual words or metaphors or symbolism or all kinds of stuff that was in the original work of art, because essentially they've thrown the work of art away to try to get at its ideas. He says here, okay, the relation between all the elements must surely be an organic one. There can be no question about that. There is, however, a very serious question as to whether the paraphrasable elements have primacy. He's wondering whether the paraphrasable elements have primacy, and his answer is that it doesn't. But a lot of people think it does. They think, well, what Shakespeare's trying to say was, and they're very excited to do that, because it gets them away from the poem. It gets them away from the work of art. And they feel like, here, I give you a classic example of when people think the paraphrasable elements of the poem are primary. I got a good one. I can do this. When people think the paraphrasable elements of the poem are primary, think about somebody who spoils a movie for you. Now, obviously, I get it. You don't want movies spoiled, right? You want to be surprised. You don't want someone to tell you the ending of the movie. I get it. I don't want people to tell me the end of the movie either, okay? And I've had a lot of movies spoiled by students who saw them before I did. You don't want to have it spoiled. But let me suggest something bigger. If finding out about the twist in the movie ahead of time ruins the movie, probably not a very good movie. People who are mad about the twists being spoiled, they tend to think that the paraphrasable elements, the kind of things you can just tell people about quickly, right? You paraphrase the movie. I'll put it in my own words. I'm trying to think of an example of a movie I can spoil that won't upset people who haven't seen it, but I feel like everybody in America saw Avengers Endgame at this point. So it was like a year ago. So I'm going to go ahead and say Tony Stark dies at the end of Avengers Endgame. If somebody says that to you and it ruins the movie, it's probably not a very good movie. The good movies are the ones where you know the ending ahead of time. You're there to see the way it's done. Shakespeare, for example. Students often don't know what's going to happen in Shakespeare, but back then people 100% knew what was going to happen in Shakespeare. Well, why'd they go see it? Because they wanted to see the language. They wanted to hear the words and see how it was done. Just like I read Twilight, but then I saw the movie. Well, why? Didn't I know everything that was going to happen? Well, yeah, but I was interested in the specific choices the specific movie made. Whereas what happens in the books is paraphrasable, right? The events of the book, yes, the events of the movie are very similar to the events of the book, and that's paraphrasable. Because you can just summarize it real quick. But the summary doesn't ruin the movie. The movie has specific things in it that I like. I know a lot of people don't like her, but I actually really like the Kristen Stewart who plays Bella. I think she's fucking great. A bunch of my friends think I'm stupid for saying that, but I get it. But I really like her. I think she's really charming. She has just a certain kind of, let's say, energy that I like. I don't quite know how to put it. Also, everybody in that movie is absurd. Rami Malek, everybody in that movie is really good looking. Rami Malek is really cool. I like that dude. That's why I'm seeing the movie. For the details like that, I want to see the individual actors. I want to see the crazy choices that they make. I want to see the outfits. Is a classic one, right? A summary is not going to tell me about the cool outfits everyone's wearing. One of the things I want to see is the outfits. Twilight's probably not the best example of that, but there's lots of movies where I'll go see it just for the costuming. I really enjoyed Little Women, but one of the things I enjoyed about Little Women was the costume choices. I thought Amy looked fucking rad in that movie. And a summary is not going to say anything about her costume choices because that's the art part. And the summary is just telling me what happened. Okay, so let's take a look a little bit more with Cleneth Brooks. Okay, so in the next section, Cleneth Brooks says, I always want to call him Cleneth, but it's not Cleneth, it's Clenth. To repeat, most of our difficulties in criticism are rooted in the heresy of paraphrase. Underline that because that is an extremely important part. The heresy of paraphrase. Heresy is when you sort of say something that's blasphemous or against religion. Saying something against God is heresy. He says paraphrase is a heresy because art is like a religious text. And to paraphrase it is to throw it away. And so it's heresy, he says, to paraphrase a work of art. Because when you do that and you throw the art away, you've done something that's almost like going against God. It's a huge break. I love it's a very dramatic way to put it. And I think you can tell by my coat that I care a lot about drama. So let's take a look at what he says. So Clenth Brooks, it's a heresy of paraphrase. He says, if we allow ourselves to be misled by it, we distort the relation of the poem to its truth. We raise the problem of belief in a vicious and crippling form. We split the poem between its form and its content, right? The form is the individual words that are used, the images that are used, and the content is like what those words mean. So he says, you don't want to split it. If you do that, you're messing it up. We bring the statement to be converted into an unreal competition with science or philosophy or theology. That was just saying earlier about people read a poem to find out about the author, read a poem to find out about history. In short, we put our questions about the poem in a form calculated to produce the battles of the last 25 years of the use of poetry. Well, I'm not going to get into that because those battles are over. All right, I'm going to pick this up in the next video. I think we're doing pretty good.